Have you ever wondered how your sales performance compares against your competitors and peers? The B2B Sales Benchmark Report provides the definitive guide to what success looks like in 2021. See how you compare in terms of win rate, sales cycle, average deal value, relationships, and engagement. You can see the results and get the full report at ebsta.com/B2B-sales-benchmarks. This is Sales Ops Demystified, the #1 most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales operations onto the show to deconstruct the why, what, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Ebsta, the leading customer engagement platform for Salesforce. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Sales Operations Demystified. We're joined at the offices of Cube19. Now, Cube19 are almost a part or a brother company to Ebsta. I've actually met Matt before in a meeting where we were chatting about marketing stuff. But Matt is actually pretty experienced on the sales side and sales management and sales operations.
Yep, correct.
Which is going to be super interesting because we've had a whole range of sales operations people on the webinar/podcast, some of which have had no sales experience before, but are in the operations role, some of which have kind of come through the sales journey. Mm-hmm. And I find this really interesting how, well, actually one of the questions we're going to go through is sales experience necessary? So we'll get into that shortly.
Perfect.
So as some admin, I think everyone knows the webinar/podcast is now live on iTunes. So if you Google search Sales Ops Demystified iTunes, you'll see it there. And I want to thank everyone for attending and everyone for listening. And we're going to jump into the questions. Perfect. So let's kick off, actually probably with more of an open question to you, Matt, in your kind of journey to where you are today, and also weaving Cube19 because I do quite want to talk about them as well. So if you could take it away.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thank you for having me as well. Again, my name is Matthew Cerra. I'm head of sales now at Cube19. And while I'm just head of sales by title, I actually manage all of our systems and sales enablement tools, as well as our process, our company global pipeline, and then all of the things related to operations as well. So quite an expansive list of things that I'm accountable for. But how my journey kind of really began, I got into tech sales back in 2010. And I joined a company called NewsGator. And at the time, they were Microsoft North America Partner of the Year. Small company, maybe about 70 people at the time. And they had built a social sharing platform based on SharePoint, which is in the Microsoft stack. Ironically enough, I had taken a step back from being in a full sales cycle and managing that to just doing business development work because I was really fascinated by the product and what it was doing for the clients in the market. So I joined with them, and within about a month of that, Microsoft bought our biggest competitor for $1.4 billion.
Oh, really?
So immediately, as you can imagine, when Microsoft says stop calling NewsGator, people tend to listen. So while that was a tough pill to swallow for a lot of us, it actually opened the door to a lot of opportunities for me. So from that, people started leaving the organization, going to other places, obviously because of the circumstances. Mm-hmm. So as people left the organization, I was able to take on more accountability and responsibility and kind of diversify my skill sets and competencies. So at that point, I started doing sales operations. I started managing the business development group and then also doing sales as well. From that, they already had a well-defined sales process because we had someone that was dedicated to that. So it was kind of
you, or that was somebody else.
It was somebody prior to me. Yeah, his name was Dave. Great guy. So he had really laid the foundation of success for us. So it was more or less letting me dip my toe in the water and see what he had already done and how it worked, and just make incremental improvements on that. Yeah. From there, kind of an interesting story. A woman named Rebecca had been trying to recruit me for months and months to join an organization. And I kept telling her no, that I was dedicated and loyal to this organization. I'm going to stay. And so she finally convinced me into a phone call and on the precipice that will help us define what we should be looking for. You know, what should somebody be doing in the first 30, 60, 90 days if they're going to start a new sales organization, as well as all the process and operations and sales enablement tools to make that effective and efficient. Mm-hmm. So little did I know the CEO was actually on that phone call. So immediately after that, they called me back and asked if I would come to an interview.
So you must have.
I guess so. Yeah. I've always been a very analytical and process-oriented person. Yeah. I always want to know the why behind what I'm doing, and I think that's critically important. And I can talk about that in a little bit more detail. But essentially, the next day I met him on a Saturday, and kind of like out of a film, we sat there and talked for an hour and a half, and then he grabbed a napkin and wrote an offer on it, and passed it across the table, and began my journey into more sales operations. So when I joined that organization, there were 3 people they had in their sales group. Right out of university. And when I walked in, they're all on Facebook, of course. And they had absolutely no process in place. They had nothing done in the CRM, which at the time was Salesforce. They had no other tools that they were using whatsoever. So it was pretty much a clean slate. So from that, I grew that organization with the help of many other people, obviously, from 3 to 35 reps, and from the initial annual run rate of about 200,000 to an annual recurring revenue of upwards of 15, 20 million, something like that. Yep.
So your role there was specifically operations?
It wasn't actually. So I've always straddled the fence. It's one of those things when people think you're good at something, they're going to keep asking you to do it. And I have a hard time saying no. So I was in charge of, initially, I had my own individual quota. I managed the sales organization.
So the whole time you had your own.
Yeah. Cool. Well, halfway through your role, and then just managed the sales organization, both in terms of operations as well as sales enablement and leadership as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so that the end of that role takes us up to which year?
That took us up to 2017. So, So that was about 6 years of that, 3 years there and a couple of years and 3 years at NewsGator as well.
And why did you choose to leave the second one?
Well, quite frankly, it wasn't a lot of challenge left. My CSO was actually one of the investors in the company. So there was no more upward mobility for me. And quite frankly, I'm one of those people, even if I'm really good at something, if I'm not being challenged, I can get quite complacent. And there was a day when I was sitting with one of my representatives, and he asked me to help him write this email. And about 5 minutes had gone by, he's like, "Why haven't you written anything?" And he's like, "You've written this email 10 times already today, just reword it." And I was like, "That's the problem. I'm no longer being challenged." Mm-hmm. I think at that moment, he looked at me and said, "You're going to quit, aren't you?" So, and there was just a lot of other circumstances as well. They're a great company. They treated me very well. Really appreciated all the friendships and colleagues I made over that course of the time there. But always wanted to work overseas as well. And so really wanted to get that international business experience. And the company had also grown from 30 people, I was number 30, to 250 plus. And I really enjoy that kind of seed funding all the way through Series A and B, and then to exit. So when it starts to get a little bit too big and there's a lot of not a lot of creativity left, that's when I kind of decided to make a move.
So the role that you have at the moment, did that start off as head of sales?
The role here, the Cube19, yes. So the title was always head of sales. But again, one of the things that they were really looking for was to kind of codify their entire process, really make sure that they understood, from A to Z what they needed to do to drive efficiencies within the business, and how you can focus on the right activity at the right time, and how you can use data essentially to work more effectively and smarter, not just as hard.
Head of sales operations.
Yeah, I guess so.
So in answer to the question, how did you get into sales operations? You actually, that first role was in the field, but then you've kind of been doing everything. Management, sales, and operations throughout your whole career.
Yeah, pretty much.
So right now in the Cube role, if you had to try, and it might not be possible, but try and split your time between those 3 areas in terms of the percentage, what percentage do you spend time selling, what percentage do you spend time managing, and then operating?
It's a good question. I think in any role, time management is probably one of the things that everyone struggles with from time to time. For me, when I first came in, there wasn't a whole lot of process that was well defined. Everybody had been just getting on by doing it their own way. So we didn't really have a well-defined structure even for, when should an opportunity be an opportunity? When should you close out an opportunity? Just kind of some basic stuff, right? And then everybody was going on gut. Well, I think they're going to buy one day. It's like, well, you think that's great. Glad that you're optimistic, but let's put some actual evidence behind that. So for the first 3 to 6 months I was here, I actually just focused on kind of reviewing what they actually had in place. Because there's no sense in changing things that are already working. You don't want to convolute the process. You don't want to make too much change at once, where people just kind of throw their hands up and feel overwhelmed. So focused those first 3 to 6 months on just purely reviewing their current CRM, which is Salesforce, looking at that process all the way through, and how it also has knock-on effect to CS, to implementation, to all the different groups and business units within Cube19. And then basically, since we've got that foundation laid, and then we've done all the documentation and we've made all the necessary changes within those systems, then reviewed all the sales enablement tools, put those into more of an optimal position to be used. And then from there, now it's more focused on looking and analyzing what we're doing, seeing if the process is correct, and then seeing where their gaps might be, and then also having spot coaching for individuals where they excel in one area but may need a little bit of help and support in another.
So in terms of the actual amount of time you spend selling at the moment?
Probably 30%, not much. We have a really good team. So we hire really good talent. So where I usually come in is around strategy. So when we're going into a discovery call, or what do they want to get out of that discovery call? How are you going to align on next steps? Putting in together negotiation strategies and things like that. So I'm not doing any demos or anything like that at this point.
And how big is the sales organization at Cube19 at the moment?
So at the moment we are 10 right now. When I started, I think it was about 6. So we hired an entire business development group to kind of help territory map. The market we serve, which is the recruitment industry, is pretty expansive, and there's an extremely long tail of the market. So out of, 20,000 recruiting agencies just in the UK, a majority, if not 60 to 70% of those are sub 10 users. And obviously you can't buy the data to see which CRMs they're using, which we're built on top of from an analytics perspective. So
interesting.
Question,
and I think we may have alluded to this already, is what you think makes a really good sales operations person?
It's an easier question than it's going to sound, but really helping people understand the why behind what they're doing. When I first started my career in 2007 out of university, my boss told me to do something. I just jumped and did it, right? This is like, if you don't do it, you're going to be in trouble. Now we've kind of grown up in this generation of immediacy, and we have access to information at our fingertips. And so inevitably, the first question most people get when they're told to do something is why, right? Why should I make 100 calls? Why should I send this many emails? Why should I use this tool? And so it's really about not just telling them what to do, but helping them understand that if you do this now, you're putting yourself in a position for success later. And so that you can start to build that commitment and accountability across one another. So instead of just telling someone that, hey, you need to enter information into the CRM so that we can track conversion rates across stages, for example, explain to them why that's important. So it could be something as simple as, we want to measure loss rates. And we want to win quickly, but we want to lose more quickly. If you've not done a really good discovery call and then you're holding on to it and you've got happy years thinking that you believe they're going to sell, you end up spending an exorbitant amount of time working with deals that, may close, but the probability of that could be 20 to 30%. Whereas if you just get people and organizations out of your pipeline that aren't committed, aren't serious, or don't have well-defined use cases, then you're just going to be wasting your time, quite frankly.
So what you're actually saying, I think, is the influence, which is in my mind, part of management, is really important to be able to get the sales team that you're working with to change the way they work.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you can't do that, then they're not going to listen to anything you say.
Exactly. And from a sales operations perspective, can't measure what's not there. And you can put documentation in place and you can have it very accessible for everyone to go back to and refer to. But quite frankly, people tend to stick to their habits. They fall back into those bad habits. So it's about just helping them understand that if you can give us this information, I can better analyze where we can win for you in these areas. So really helping it be very specific to the individual. So I think it's important, instead of just saying, oh, you need to make sure that this field's updated, or you've done this and you've sent out this many emails, or you followed up on these inbound lead process. It's also just as important to explain the why behind everything we're doing, because then people buy into it more when they understand what the value is for them and how they can provide value. So really that's the two things that most people look at is the V's. Like, I want to be valuable and I want to provide value. And if you can explain how they can do that, they're going to be in a much more better position to carry that ball forward and keep doing it consistently.
Because we ask this question for every guest, and it's quite interesting because some people focus on hard skills. So they need to be analytical, or you need to do this and this. And then other people are more like, you need to be able to influence and work with people. So it's like the soft side, that's like the hard side. And I find that really interesting, how the role, you really need to know your numbers and analyze data. And then you also really have to have this almost like management and influence skills, right?
Yeah. Effective communication. And I always joke with people, although I've always been really good at external selling, I think I'm better at internal selling, getting people to buy into what we're doing and why it's important to them, instead of saying that the business is asking me to do this. So yeah, the more you can effectively communicate what you're asking people to do and what the benefit is to them, you're just going to be in a much better position.
Next, onto my favorite question of this whole podcast is, do you think sales experience is a necessity to be an effective sales operations person?
No. There's some tangible benefits.
What are the benefits?
If you've lived that role, you know how tough it can be and how many different balls are up in the air at one time and how many times you have different fields you're supposed to be entering information into. So from a sales perspective, you get the kind of cloud that they're living in every day, and how do you drive organization, attention to detail, follow up and follow through and at the highest quality possible. So it's about understanding how you can mitigate all the noise. So you as a sales operations person may be asking them to do this thing, but they've been asked for 15 other things this day, not just by their internal colleagues, but then 15 things by the prospects they're potentially working with or existing clients. So one of the things I always do with people is, if they come and ask me for something, I'll say, more than happy to do that. Can you explain the use case? And if they can explain it and articulate it well, then I say, okay, here are the 20 things I have on my list right now. Where do you think this should fit in? And then we come to an agreement on how we can drive that together. But in the meantime, what should you be doing to kind of be self-sufficient as well?
We get that as well with the marketing team, right? We have a Trello board because in the marketing team, everyone's like, yeah, you need to do this, and we're like, put in the Trello board and then we can process. So totally understand that.
Yeah, so it's not just, sales ops is one of those things that you can, if you're analytical and you're process oriented, you can do really, really well. It's about salespeople are kind of a little bit crazy, to be honest, right? They have a different mindset. So it's about being able to get into that mindset.
And so it can be useful to have almost been in that mindset before, e.g. have been in sales before, so you can understand that. But it's also not impossible to do the role without being able to understand it, even if you haven't done it before.
Definitely not. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Cool. Current or favorite? Actually, no, let's do current tech stack that you guys are running.
So part of our MarTech stack is, again, we're a business of sub 50 people. So obviously as you get into large organizations, it's much bigger. So we currently use for our CRM, which is Salesforce. We obviously use Epsta for our email campaigns and integration into Salesforce to track all those activities and those metrics and to do business development work and basically manage the sales cycle and communication. We also use Cube19, which is a conference tool. Yep, really good tool. We use it for coaching as well. We can create playlists so that people can listen back to different segments of a sales process. We've even created an entire onboarding platform within that. So we just basically hand them the playlist and say, start listening to a new hire.
So you have, is that like extracts from real customer calls and notes or someone speaking about how it was good? Why it was good. That's really cool.
So
you can just, whenever someone joins, you send that to them. Yeah, that's really nice. We should link out to Cube19. Cool.
Yeah, it's a good tool. And then we also use Cluster for our analytics. Yep.
We've had Rory on the podcast.
Nice. Yeah, he's a good man. He and Dan are
so what do you use? What does Cluster do for you guys?
So they do all of the analytics. So they read all the data that sits within CRM in our CRM Salesforce. So we have dashboards for each individual, for each team.
In Cluster.
So
it sits on top of Salesforce and gives you more insights about what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. If anybody knows anything about any CRM, the reporting, look, you can get the information, but the biggest problems with data are either you can't get the information, I can get it, but I can't get it in real time, or I don't trust the quality of the data.
Yeah.
And then every decision we make in sales operations is based off of flawed reasoning and flawed data, which means we're going to further exacerbate poor go-to-market strategies. So yeah, we use Cluster to help not just manage performance and set targets. We're not a very hit you over the head kind of business. We have targets of like, let's say 40 calls, but the real target is how many ops have you created in the business development group? How many of those have moved on to a certain stage within the process so they're sales qualified? From a sales perspective, it's, about the optionality in the pipeline, as I refer to it as. So, you don't want to have just a couple big deals in your pipeline. And, at varying stages, you want different size deals that have different velocities throughout the sales process. So, Cluster helps us read time and stage. They help us kind of any metric you really want. They can help surface for you and be able to kind of identify, where things are happening. So they do inflow and outflow too. So when you look at a new month and you're like, oh, I've got $1 million in the pipeline. Well, how much of that flowed and pushed from the last month? And how much of it's still viable? Right. So really getting the behind the information, which is key. instead of just looking at a vanity metric, which is 1 million in the pipeline, right? So use Cluster for that. We also use GetAccept for our e-signing, all of our contracts, and we track and measure all of that. We have LinkedIn Navigator as well, obviously for a whole host of reasons. And then a new one that we just implemented, should have been implemented a while ago. We are using now Vidyard, which is a video messaging tool.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, it's probably the one I'm most excited about right now, just because it's kind of new. Yeah. It's not new to me. I've been using their free version for a couple of years. And especially with what we sell, which is we sell growth analytics and data to recruiting industries or agencies. And what we find is that it's really hard to call someone up and say, what are your growth objectives? What are you looking to accomplish? And how are you using data to do that? And they're like, oh, well, we run reports. We're not a KPI business, but yet we track CV sent, first interviews, so you're a metric-driven business. But I think for us, being able to show software to get them to be interested right then and there, it's gotten us a lot better engagement and a lot better conversion. So when we were still on the free trial, one of my sales representatives, Tom, he actually sent out a Vidyard, just complete pitch, 2.5 minutes, sent it out. The guy wrote back, great pitch, call me right now. Really? Right. So I think
the Vidyard, just like to jump in, it allows you to do really sweet, fast screen recording videos with your face that you can ping out.
It does. And then with the actual paid version, you can have libraries of content. So basically I can carousel videos, I can gate them, I can have a call to action at the end of them. I can integrate it directly into our website and within a microsite essentially, so that they can transverse from my email that goes out. They click the link on the video. It'll have a personalized message from me. Then it'll roll into whatever you want. Maybe it's a use case we solve for. Maybe it's a customer testimonial. Maybe it's a product feature. I'm not a huge fan of showing product feature, but if you tie it to something, it can be useful. But essentially then they go to the website, they watch this, and then they can click right into anything else about the organization. And we can track all that through Pardot, which is our marketing automation tool. All that information gets fed back into Salesforce along with EPSTA scores, along with everything else that we collect from these different tools.
Got it. Yep. So your favorite out of all of those, your favorite one, or the one that's really like crushing for you at the moment?
We use EPSTA the most. I guess it shouldn't be a surprise. We do, so essentially what I have our business development group doing is they have 2 active campaigns running at all times. And anywhere, and I let them have some freedom with this. Set up the cadence, try it, let's A/B test it. Nobody ever is going to be 100% right all the time. So let's see if something works. So we'll do a series of 3 to 5 emails that go out through EPSTA, and in between those we have calls that are going out and following up on that. We also now are integrating the Vidyard into EPSTA. So when we send out an EPSTA, the Vidyard's right in there, and it's just all automated. So from that perspective, and also because the industry in which we serve, none of these people have voicemails, emails. Best way to get hold of them. I mean, because we can call so many times and they're just so busy running around putting out fires or going to meet clients or whatever they might be doing, that these managing directors and executives are rarely at their desks. So the best way for us to communicate is through email, and then within the email through video messaging.
Nice.
Yep.
We touched on this earlier on the data quality piece.
Yeah.
What do you guys do around data quality, and how do you deal with data quality in the CRM?
Yeah, so I'm laughing because we all know that it's a never-ending saga or battle. It's one of those things that, again, going back to explaining the why to people, why it's important that they do this. So between Cluster and between some native Salesforce reporting that I've set up, I have fields that allow me to quickly spot check and see, okay, if this hasn't been updated, there's more likely more things within this account that haven't been updated. So I kind of put out my own like early warning flags or like little tsunami buoys out there, make sure that I can't be everywhere at every time. And people are always going to have parts that they miss. I'm guilty of it myself. So it's best, what can I do to make sure that I at least can get an understanding of what's starting to go wrong before it's gone wrong. And I can't then affect a positive outcome.
Nice. So these like specific reports you have in Salesforce that'll flag when on an account some field is not there, and that normally says to you that, okay, maybe there's other stuff missing, I should go in.
Yeah, definitely. And usually it's as simple as creating a next step field on any opportunity. If somebody's not updating the next step every time they speak to an account, there's probably other things going on. Because the next step is supposed to be critically the next thing that you're going to be trying to accomplish, and what do you want to get out of that next meeting and everything like that. So if you're not doing those things, there's probably other things that have been missed in the cycle as well.
So if that's a really nice little tip, is if you don't have if that's in Salesforce native.
Yeah. So just the opportunity level, I just created a field with a text box.
Oh,
Nope,
text
text box.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Basically, it's a little bit archaic, I guess it sounds like when you describe it. But basically, what I have them do is they should be updating or touching their accounts at least once a week, even if they're not actively engaged. Let's say you've had a discovery call with someone and they can't meet for 3 weeks. Well, you shouldn't just let 3 weeks go by before you get to that next meeting and then say, hey, how's the last 3 weeks been? You should be drip feeding them information through Ebsta. We have campaigns set up to do that for people that are in sales cycle. And then we have pick lists that show us what their use cases are so that we can send out the right Ebsta campaign with the right content.
With the right vidyard in there.
With the right vidyard, yeah. And so
that's nice.
Yeah. So basically what I have them do at that next step stage is just say what the date is of the next step when you entered it. So today, the 28th or 29th of March, 28th. Yep. And then, spoke to Tom. Next meeting is, April 2nd. We're going to be demoing these specific things. Just that simple.
That's what an ideal BDR sales rep would be doing, right?
Exactly.
A nice update.
Yeah. And it's some of those things like you might have it in your head, but if you're talking to, like our inside team, they're working 15 opportunities a month per person. So the chances that you start to, cross over between what you thought you heard from one client and what you heard from another can kind of cause confusion. So
50 ops per person. I can't really imagine how hectic that must be.
15.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're hoping to get to 50. Actually, I wouldn't want 50.
Too much for one person.
No, not only that, but I mean, again, let's be more efficient, So let's work on, losing early and making sure we're spending the time with the right people, and then we can close more deals. So we look at, what's our conversion rate from discovery to presentation? If we do a really good job on discovery, we close upwards of 60, 70% of everybody that we demonstrate. Yep.
Nice. That's actually something that I haven't heard anyone talk about, is losing early. And
lose early, lose often.
Because actually, you're not trying to maximize the amount of opportunities you have. You're trying to maximize the deals, right? And so if you're not losing early, you're spending time on more opportunities that don't close, that time's wasted.
Yep. Yeah. So one of the metrics I look at,
which is actually the next question so the next question is the single biggest metric you would judge someone. So, but let's talk about this one and then move into that one.
That's actually one of them. Okay. I really look at time and stage. And the reason why I look at time and stage, and again, so basically you can't move to discovery until so we have qualifications, our first stage, then discovery.
And then after that?
Then after that, we have presentation, then solution development, and then negotiation, contract out, contract signed.
Nice.
It varies a little bit when we get to the enterprise level. We'll actually have another stage in there because there are some variances, obviously, the complexities of the business. Yeah. But essentially, what we want to look at is that we know we can improve our close rates if we just do a better job in the discovery process. And what I look at when I see time and stage is I look at it by the size of the opportunity against our historical records of closed one. And if it starts to get outside that boundary, cluster will flag it.
I was going to say this is in cluster, right? Sorry, that sounds really interesting. We went through it quite fast. So you have historic closed one data of time and stage by size, and then each week or whatever you're looking at and comparing to what the ideal route through the process is based on size. Okay, correct. Cool. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's important because you want to emulate what success looks like. So what we look at when we say time and stage is I'm not necessarily looking, you can have some, for example, that, normally, let's say on a sub 10,000 pound deal, you're in discovery for only 10 days before you get to presentation.
But on average, normally for a closed one.
Yeah, on average. I'm just giving some hypothetical numbers. Yeah. And so let's say one opportunity is showing that it's been in stage of discovery for 20 days. Well, there might be good justification for that. They're out on, summer holiday, right? They're having surgery, or they have other project priorities, or, somebody's doing something else. They just can't, evaluate the software at this point. So there are some exceptions to that. However, the reason I look at time and stage is to see how well the sales representative is boxing in the opportunity and really creating momentum within the deal. So what I mean by that is that if you've just done a discovery call with someone and they aren't wanting to put something on the diary within the next 72 hours, there's something wrong.
Okay.
Like, unless they can justify it and say that, they're on holiday or they have other projects going on, there's something you missed that hasn't made it. This is an urgent priority for the business. And so you need to really start to evaluate that. So that's just one way in which I look at the strength and the health of deals is how quickly the next meeting is booked and how long it's in stage for. So
that's a good way that you judge your reps by, you could have a report that says average time in that stage over the past 6 months by rep. And then you could see the potentially a low performing rep would have maybe a longer time of stage. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, because usually what will happen for newer reps, they'll get to the end of the discovery call, or the good one is the end of a product demonstration. Like, so what do you think next step should be? I don't, from a sales perspective, you always want to say, typically based on our experience, if you want to talk next steps, we would set up a time within 72 hours of today, give you some time to think it over, have internal discussions. And if everything is aligned with us being able to help solve for your use cases, goals, and objectives, we can talk about ROI, pricing, implementation, everything thereafter. And you pick the date. You say 72 hours. And this is kind of and let them push back. And if they say, no, can't do that, we need more time, that's fine. But when you leave it just completely open-ended, inevitably somebody's going to give you a very artificial time frame. Like, call me in 2 weeks. And then there's nothing on the diary. So that's the next
momentum,
big piece.
You lose the momentum of the deal.
And then you got to start asking yourself as the representative, why is it that they don't want to they're blowing me off and just saying 2 weeks? Red flag should be going off in your mind right there.
This is a sales masterclass. It's not just sales operations here, right? This is a sales masterclass. I'm conscious we didn't ask the audience. Do you have any questions come through? Okay, what have we got from James Nolan? What are the best metrics that provide coaching opportunities for junior sales? Thank you, James.
Yeah, good question. So depends on what you're looking to accomplish. So when people first start our organization in the first 3 months, we give them soft metrics. We're not asking them to actually set any opportunities. If they do great, we'll give them credit for that, obviously. But it's more about learning our process. And so we actually will give commissions out if you just follow our process.
Really?
So it's ironic that in sales you get paid a basic to do just your job, and then we'll quote you on top of it just to do your job. But it's because we really want to drive the right behavior from the onset.
How do you, metric wise, how do you know if someone's following the process?
So basically we set all the targets and everything within clusters. So we look at all the typical KPIs. So, calls to prospects, emails, how many active campaigns are running, how many people you have in those campaigns, what's the percentage of conversion rate across those. The reason why that's important to us is I let them kind of have some creativity so that if they want to create some messaging and it works really well, great, we'll emulate that across the business. So those are pretty standard. Some of the other things we look at though are how well are they at territory mapping. So what we can look at is I can run a report in Salesforce and say, all right, show me all these accounts that have these missing fields. So basically, I don't know who the managing director is. I don't know their CRM. I don't know these basic principles on whether I can even sell to them, maybe. So we and then have them targeted on that, being able to uncover new opportunities in the marketplace. We also target them on creating and finding new opportunities that aren't in the CRM. Really helping kind of coach them in the business development set up. From a sales perspective, the first things that we start to look at are, from a metric standpoint, we look first at, how well they have to be demo certified and discovery certified before we'll let them actually ever take a phone call. But what we're really looking for on those metrics is how quickly do they convert a discovery call to a presentation? Because time kills all deals, right? So it's really about that last 5 minutes of a conversation is almost always the most pivotal. And so is the first 5. People tend to know what they want to show based on what they learned in the first 5 minutes. And then they just think that at the end, somebody's going to say, let me buy. That's never going to happen in most cases. So we look at, time to get someone moving through the process and the velocity of those deals. I think that's the big one for us. And then also, how many opportunities are they creating? And then also importantly, how much optionality do they have in their pipeline? So again, if you've created 5 opportunities and our average deal size is say 10,000 pounds, and these are all 100,000 pound opportunities, I'm going to say congratulations, but that's 6 to 9 months down the road. You've got nothing right now. So we target them specifically on outreach to different size and segments of the market. So when I look at activity and I say, okay, you made 40 calls, that's great, but who do those 40 calls go to? You could have made 40 calls to one client. That's not going to be very productive. You could have made 40 calls to 40 different people. Probably also not that productive. So we look for a concerted, concentrated effort around accounts. So the other thing that we do, to answer your question, James, is we create short lists in Salesforce. So prospect list 1, prospect list 2, and then a short list. So essentially every week they come in and they say, okay, I'm going to put 20 accounts into prospect list 1, 20 accounts into prospect list 2. There's an 8 to 10 touch outreach campaign with that over the course of 2 weeks. And they alternate between prospect list 1 and prospect list 2 every day. anyone that engages with any of the content moves to the short list. And that becomes something that they're more proactive and actually making more calls into and things like that.
Nice. You're really deep. You can tell that you really
hopefully
I'm passionate about this.
Yes.
Any more questions after we finish? Okay, so final question. Is there someone out there who you really look up to, specifically in sales operations, or who has taught you stuff about that before?
It's interesting because when I first got into sales operations, it was by way of people leaving the business. So I didn't have the mentor, but as I mentioned, Dave had already set up a really good process, and we were such a close-knit group of colleagues that I would call him up and I could still rely on him to be like, well, why did you do this? How do I make the changes? I literally taught myself Salesforce from looking at YouTube videos, which is scary for anybody to think that I have sysadmin rights and own our CRM. But I very cautious about what I do. And I make sure that if it is outside of my competencies that I get someone else. But other than that, I really, honestly, for sales operations, relied on salespeople. I would go talk to them and be like, what do you hate the most?
Nice.
What do you like? And just seeing what they wanted and why, and understanding, and then telling them whether or not they were right and we can make this more streamlined. But then I'd say in addition to that, there's a lot of good resources online, a lot of good people you can learn and connect with. Jake, he's a gentleman out here, Kairoya.
What's his name? Sorry, Jake.
Kairoya.
Cool. I think we actually have Jake lined up for the podcast maybe.
Perfect. Yeah, he's a fantastic guy. He's really smart and switched on. So I actually been trying to schedule a lunch with him to pick his brain for a little while now.
Awesome. Well, if anybody is interested, or if anyone works for a recruitment company, and they're not currently using Cube19, then I highly recommend reaching out to Matt at Cube19.com.
That is correct.
Cool. I highly recommend reaching out. Thanks so much for coming on. I felt like I learned a lot about both sales. I love that spiel that you do at the end, and also sales operations. I really like the thing about using Cluster. Actually, shout out to Cluster for making a sweet tool, comparing what best in class for you guys or like the normal flow is, and then using that to judge the deals in pipeline. We have a question. Okay, we got one more question. Jay, okay. Maybe we will, this looks like a big one. Jay is actually on the line.
Yeah. Hey, Jay.
Hey, Jay. How do you leverage Cluster to forecast for the month or quarter? Do you ask your reps to forecast and use that, or use analytics and conversion rates to make your own forecast? Now, Matt, we can answer this if we can condense it, because I don't want to overrun, into 60 seconds. Are you confident?
I can do that.
Sweet. Thank you, Jay.
You know, I'm American and we talk a lot. Thanks, Jay. We do it within Cluster. And I always have the team first take a stab at what their forecast is, both in terms of commits and best case on a month and quarterly basis. Because I want them to take some onus and responsibility. And so when they come to me and they are like, here's my number, we pick it apart. Why is this a deal you're committing? Let's start with those ones that you feel really strongly about, and then see what risk may exist in the deal and how we can mitigate against that. We also look at time and stage. If you're committing a deal to me that's been sitting in presentation for 50 days, I'm going to say, well, what makes you think they're going to engage with you now, right? I know you did all this work and they said they were excited, but they've gone dark on you now. Something's going on there. And then what's the strategy we put into play for that? And then we weight the pipeline, obviously. So each stage has a different percentage of probability to close. Now, some people counter argue that and say, well, you can't get a percentage of a deal. But also, especially at the inside level, we have deals that'll come in and will close in 4 days. So you can't really forecast that.
Yeah.
So because of those situations, you have to weight the pipeline. And so we have enough optionality across the pipeline. We have 10 deals, across 5 different stages. I'll take the average of those, add those up and say, okay, you're going to commit this number. Mm-hmm. You're not necessarily committing a deal at the beginning of the month. Mm-hmm. This is for inside. Field and enterprise, obviously, they're very specific. Yeah. But for inside, it's, again, just committing based on a number.
Nice. Awesome. We will finish that. I think that was that 60 seconds. I think so.
Hope so.
Matt, again, thank you so much. Anybody interested in Cube19, I will go to Cube19.com, or I'll drop Matt an email, Matt@Cube19. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.